Welcome to Educating Barry, where family meets honesty and love meets learning. I'm David, founder of Queer Education Consultancy, and with me is my dad, Barry.
Together, we're navigating the twists and turns of modern family life, one conversation at a time. Whether you're a parent, child, or just curious about LGBTQ+ experiences, join us as we share our journey of understanding, acceptance, and unconditional love.
Remember, we're sharing our own opinions and lived experiences. So, without further ado, let's dive in. So I guess kind of the purpose of what we want to do today is just talk about me coming out and how that kind of experience was, not only for me, but also for you. So I don't know where we kind of want to start on this, whether you want to...
It's kind of interesting because I think from my perspective, we've known you were gay for a long, long while. And it's like, from how do I, as the sort of dad who was in his 40s, I guess, when you came out, and even before then, when you were 12, 13, you think Dave's not really interested in girls. Is he? Yeah. Is there something? You almost think there's something wrong with him. Why doesn't he like girls? Because that's the way I was brought up.
So when did you? Because obviously you were 25 when I was born.
Yeah.
When did you think you first probably had thoughts that Dave might be gay?
I thought when you were 13 or 14ish. Because we found those pictures of cocks on the computers, and it's like, who the chuffing X put pictures of cocks on computers?
Yeah.
And this is back when it was a dial-up, wasn't it? So you'd go dial-up, 20 minutes later you'd have a picture arrive, and then when you go on to do what I was going to do, you find there was these pictures of willies. And I asked both you and Simon, and you both said no. And I thought, well, no enough, it is Dave. But I thought by doing that, you would say, well, actually, Dad, it's me, I'm gay.
Yeah.
But you didn't. So then it didn't put pressure back on me. But you then suddenly think, well, am I wrong? Is he just being experimental? Like from my experience, most adolescent boys will have a fantasy about a male figure at somewhere along the line, even me, and I guess because computers, when I was a kid, you didn't have computers.
Yeah.
To do things that you can do now, you had to go to the shop shelf of a magazine, and go and get the Playboy or whatever it was, HMM or whatever it was, FHM, whatever it was, to go and get the sort of porn you wanted. So I just thought, oh, it's okay, Dave's experimenting, or Simon's experimenting. I didn't know because nobody would say anything. But then you think to yourself, well, Dave is not really interested in ladies, not got a girlfriend, whereas Simon was a little bit more male, if you like, in the sense that he was more interested in girls.
Yeah, okay.
So you think to yourself, how do I approach Dave? I didn't know how to go about this. It was like, for me, it's being a heterosexual male brought up in the 50s and 60s and 70s. It's like being gay was taboo. But to me, when you think, hang on, my son's gay, your perspective changes tremendously. It's like I've said to somebody before, in my mind, you don't stop loving somebody because they're gay. You actually still, I still love you because you're Dave. It doesn't matter whether you're gay or not. You're still Dave. To me, you're my son, and I love you because you're my son.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Go on, sorry.
No, go on. I was going to say there's two things that I want to kind of pick up on. The first one is not your use of the word cocks. That's absolutely fine. They are what they are. But also that kind of, I think from my perspective, and I look back at it now, at the time it was me exploring who I was. And the only way I could do that was luckily enough through the internet that now exists. But I think there's two things, and I've kind of talked to you a little bit about this before in the past. Like the only way I could explore myself was kind of being anonymous on the internet and kind of being able to explore things. What are your thoughts on, especially now, given that kids have got mobile devices in their hands and literally have got the internet at their disposal 24/7, what are your thoughts or your messages to parents who there may be, whether they think their kid is gay or not, right? What are your messages to parents around kind of safeguarding, I guess, around that?
Yeah,
go on.
I think to me, if it was now and you were 12 or 13, I'd try and talk to you about it. Because hindsight is a wonderful thing. However, because society's changed, we've all got mobile phones or whatever you've got, tablets or whatever, and you can go in your room and you can sit there and you can watch, whatever porn you want. You can watch, women on women, men on men, men on whatever. You could do whatever you want. It's not,
Yeah.
whatever your sexualities you can find on the internet now. And for me, it's more about try and understand what it is you're feeling, and then try and get you to talk to me. Because like I was talking to Jan earlier, how do I say to 14-year-old Dave, I think you're gay? How do I do that? I don't know. Because it's pressures on. I feel guilty as well to a certain extent, because you don't know. And if I don't know, how can I help?
So did anything change then? So when you saw those images, did anything in the way you kind of spoke to me or Simon as kids or anything like that change, even if it was subconsciously in the back of your mind?
Subconsciously, I think you think, what's going on here? I didn't think either one of you were gay. I just thought, what's going on? What are you trying to do? What are you? And I just brushed it off. But then when you start to think about it more, you suddenly think, well, the way Dave's acting and the way Dave is, it's slightly different to all the other boys that I've seen. So you think to yourself, is he different? Why is he different? What's different about him? And you don't, in my experience, I didn't think you were gay. I just didn't think about that. It was just one of those things. As I say, it doesn't change anything from my side at all. It's more about how, if we go back 20 years, how do I talk to you and ask you? Because in my youth, it was that you were straight or you were gay, and gay meant lesbian or homosexual, whatever you want to call it. And the big thing for me is, how do you talk to somebody young today and say, how is it going for you? And safeguarding, as you rightly said earlier, is got to be the biggest thing for this.
Yeah.
You cannot and should not say to anybody, you can't be that.
Yeah.
So if one of my grandchildren come to me today, whatever age he is, and said to me, Granddad, I want to be a girl, what do I say to him? It doesn't mean I don't stop loving him.
Yeah.
It's just I want to be sure that he's comfortable in his skin, so to speak. So no matter what he is or where he is, what do I do?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because obviously, like from my perspective, there was those images, and I was kind of like I was in denial about it. What's interesting is you think I was probably about 13 at the time. I'd already come out in school. I'd already told my teacher, I think I was probably in year 7 or year 8, that I thought I might be gay, even though I couldn't say the words. But then I didn't come out to you till I was 19. So nothing from your perspective, like from my perspective, nothing changed in the way I was parented from you or from mum. Growing up, was there a point when you kind of realized, because you said you knew before I did, so when was that kind of point, and what was it that made you realize?
I don't think we knew before you did, because obviously you knew at 13. I think between sort of 14 and 15, it suddenly started to hit me to think, Dave's gay. It's just mannerisms, little things you do or you don't do, shall we say. But it's like, how do you, and because I'm thinking this in my head, I'm thinking, is my son gay?
Yeah.
And secondly, if he is, so what? Okay. Thirdly, how do I discuss that with a 14-year-old boy, a 15-year-old boy that I loved a bit? Again, if I go back to my childhood and the way I was brought up, you were either heterosexual or you weren't.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. So then how do I talk to my 14-year-old son or 15-year-old son who already told his teacher, but he couldn't tell his dad that he was gay, or his mum? And then, when you did come out, we then thought, both me and my good lady, my wife, then said, I told you the story before, to me, you're hovering all day long at home, and I'm thinking, okay, he's got something to tell me. What's he going to tell me? I don't know. And then you come in late that night when we're in bed, and you come in and say, Dad, I've got something to tell him. Okay, shit, he's got somebody pregnant, which is what my mentality is saying to me. And then you say, I'm gay, Dad. I think, oh, fuck for that.
Yeah.
So what I say is, thank God for that, because at least you'd come out. And what's the other thing that struck me was, if you look at Granddad, who was in his 80s at the time,
yeah,
the first thing he said to me was, I'm glad he's happy.
Yeah.
So it's this whole switching for me of how society's moved on so much from, when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, it was so black and white.
Yeah.
And now it's
a bigger spectrum, I guess, isn't there? That's the thing. There's more.
There is. And that to me is amazing, fantastic, all for that. As far as the family are concerned, we would love you no matter what. That's it. And for me, the big thing I'd like to get across in this is, if your son or daughter is gay,
or child generally, because they could be a transgender or non-binary child.
Right, whatever they are, if it's transgender, non-binary, asexual, whatever that child happens to be or want to be, support them in that journey. Don't cut them off, because they are still your child. Be it they say, well, actually, I know little Johnny wants to be Jane. Okay, support them. Don't push them away, because if you push them away, you lose the most important person in your life.
So it's lovely to hear that, and I think that's really reassuring for a load of people out there who hopefully listening to this podcast. But I think going back to when I came out age 19, I'd been up at uni in Northampton and was exploring my sexuality because I felt like I couldn't do it growing up in a small town. So then when I did make the decision to come back and tell you and mum, the thought in the back of my mind was, I have to be prepared to lose my parents. I have to be prepared to walk away from the situation today knowing I'm homeless and have nowhere to turn. That was literally, and I'm even now, I always think worst case scenario, prepare for the best, but always think worst case. That was literally the fear that ran through every part of my body that weekend, telling mum on the Saturday, and I think it was then telling you on the Sunday. So it's, that's the big thing. And I think a lot of youth still today would probably have that kind of fear. But how do you kind of, you're right in what you say, that from a parent's perspective, don't cut them off. Like, they're the best thing in your life, having kids. So you say, I'm yet to experience that. But how does a parent, without going and saying to your child, you're gay, you're a lesbian, you're trans, what have you, how do you get that message across in a way that lets your child know that regardless of who they're going to be, that they're accepted?
I think that goes back to a loving relationship. And to me, you've always been the apple of my eye. And I think if you love your children enough, does it matter? Really, does it matter? And I think the big thing for me, if anybody's listening to this podcast, any parent listening to this podcast is thinking about they may have a son or a daughter or whatever it is, please just try talking to them. That's a big regret of mine that I feel guilty about, is I didn't speak to you and say, I didn't have the guts, if you like, to say to you, Dave, are you gay? Have that conversation, and don't, whatever you do, turn the back on them.
But how would you have that conversation? Like, if it was, you were talking about your grandchild earlier, if it was your grandchild and you thought maybe there might be indications, whether that's through, as you were talking about, mannerisms, issues around the fact there are stereotypes there, but maybe, whatever reason, hasn't got girlfriends or what have you, how would you have that conversation with your grandchild?
I think it'd have to be an open sort of conversation about how you're feeling. What do you feel like? What are you doing? How do you feel about boys? How do you feel about girls? How do you feel about life in general?
Yeah.
What are you worrying about? Because I think in my limited experience, looking back, I didn't know you were bullied at school. And that's one of my biggest regrets, because I wasn't there to help you. If I'd have been there, I'd have been helping you out.
Yeah.
And I think if you take any of my grandchildren, they said to me, or I thought they were whatever, gay, bisexual, transgender, whatever they were, I think I would try and have a conversation. And it's very difficult, because you will have a different side to this, because you could be very defensive and say, well, actually, granddad, what's it got to do with you?
Yeah.
But you're, from a granddad's perspective, if you like, or even a father's perspective, you need to try and understand that child is having a horrendous time.
Yeah.
And you need to support that child. And it is hard.
Do you think it's different though? Because I'm just thinking as you're talking that you're right, but I wonder if in today's generation of kids that, when I came out, it was, I grew up born in 83, so grew up in the late 80s, 90s. Socially, the context of that was there wasn't really any positive representation for being LGBT. We were off the back of the HIV and AIDS crisis. Section 28 was happening in schools, so no one was talking about it. So there was this almost like vacuum, if you like. The only people I knew who were gay were Elton John, who was a singer and was kind of almost an entertainment figure. And then the only other one I can kind of think about is George Michael, who was then dragged through the tabloids because of his sexuality and was outed before he even wanted it and things. So I think now, when you look at it, I think we're possibly, it'd be interesting to see what you think, in a different position that
Absolutely.
maybe we're in a position actually where future generations won't necessarily come out as gay because they've got this positivity around them.
I think you should. I think today's youngsters, if you like, and I talk generally, for me, I think it would be easier nowadays to come out because there is lots more figures that you can look at. You know, as you say, when you were coming out, it was Elton John, George Michael, and maybe, you know, some cross-dresser on TV that was making fun of. But it was always, oh, he's gay, you know. Whereas now, you know, we have gay pride, we have, you know, all the LGBT stuff at work, we have your allies and all this sort of stuff. We've still got a tremendous amount to do because although we have allies and LGBT month and we have the pride and all this stuff, we're not reaching grassroots. And without people standing up and saying, I don't care, my son is my son or my daughter is my daughter, and whatever she is or he is, and he's, you know, and it's a cultural thing as well, I think, you know, because I spoke to many years ago now, I spoke to a guy and we were talking about families and he said, you know, we've got kids, I've got one of each, boy, girl, and a gay.
Yeah, okay.
Which is, you know, it was flippant remark, but the guy said to me, it was come from Indian subcontinent, said to me, I'd kill him. And I went, why? What has he done wrong? I was gay. I said, I don't care. What does it matter? What at the end of the day, what does it matter? And to me, there's too many, again, this is probably the wrong word, people that sit in the closet. People will hide the fact that they are what they are. They, you know, and it's when I was growing up, it was like, you're coming out of the closet if you're gay. You know, I don't know why they use that because it's like a weird thing, but it's one of those things, isn't it, that you say, does it matter? You know, there's so many people now that still hide it. And that's the big thing for me. Why would you, in today's society, hide so much? And one of the big things for me, I guess, is when you look at sport, which is a big thing for everybody. You know, everybody looks at sport, you know, the Premiership and the football and all this, and there's not one Premiership gay footballer.
There is one guy, I don't think, well, this is my knowledge of football, Josh Cavallo. I don't think he plays for the English teams, but he's the only openly gay professional football player that I know of. But it did make me think about what you said earlier when you said, going back to the cock pictures, right? We talked about at the beginning, when you were saying about whether it was Simon or me, and he went, well, it can't be Simon, he's more male. And I just want to pick up on the fact that, you know, what do you think you mean by, or what do you think you meant by being more male?
I think this goes back to the way I was brought up, and I think the thing is, you look at if you like, when I was growing up, there was sort of this big thing about big macho men, and you know, you're a man, you know, you've got a big, and it's like women are in the kitchen, they, you know, you come home and dinner's on the table, so there's this big stereotypical thing that's moved away, thankfully. But you look at it and you think that guy's a man's man, that guy's not a man's man. Today,
well, what is a man's man?
That back then,
like,
it's a weird thing, because then it was like you got your big builders and your stropping, you know, your big rugby players, they're men's men, whereas a woman's man would have been an effeminate person. However, today, what's the problem with me having a feminine side? I'm a heterosexual guy, but I still feel empowered to have a feminine side. And I think that's one of the big things as well. You know, we're moving away from this. I hark back to when I was a kid, but that's where, if you think about it, where we all have our preconceived ideas from. We have to get away from these.
Yeah.
So things now moving along. You going back to when you came out, we already had a preconceived idea of you were gay. We knew you were gay, but that we didn't really understand what that meant, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing is you can only base it on stereotypes and people you see around you and in culture. So,
this is going back into late 1990s, early 20s. So 20 odd years ago, things have moved on massively since then.
Mm.
Now look at now, we have transgender people, males, who are transgendering openly in the walking around. You know, we have people in the local town here that you can see are guys that are transgendering, and the other way around as well.
And that's significant. If somewhere, you know, such as the small town I grew up in, has now moved to the point where people can be visible in society for being LGBT plus, then we know we're heading in the right direction. I'm sure they still get a torrent of abuse and they've still got a lot they need to go through.
Yeah, there's an awful lot more we need to do. But
yeah, but it is small steps, isn't it? One step at a time.
Yeah, it's something like, it's like trying to change direction on an oil tanker. You can't just turn the wheel; it'll move left or move right. It takes, 5 or 6 miles for you to do that. So if we, as a society, and hopefully from one of the things that I would like to see from this is that if one person from this podcast says, do you know what? I don't care if my son or my daughter's gay, lesbian, transsexual. I've changed the world. One person, that's all it needs to be, to say, do you know what? I agree with educating Barry's podcast. But to me, that's what it's all about. If you have children, you have a responsibility for that child to make sure they are safe, secure throughout life. As far as I'm concerned, you're whatever age you are. I won't say on this.
I'm 40. I don't mind. I'll own it.
So you're 40, all right. So you are still my baby boy. And my job as your dad, or my primary function as your dad, is protect you. Whatever you do, it's protecting you. I don't, if somebody said something to you about your being sexuality, I'd have to say something.
Yeah.
And that is something you've taught me, because obviously when we've had discussion before, but for me, until you have a son or daughter that is transgender, homosexual, lesbian, asexual, bisexual, whatever they are, heterosexual even, support them. Don't cut them off, because you'll lose the most important person in life, and they will lose something. You will. The person that cuts you off loses more than the person that doesn't. Because if on that day that you came out, if we'd have said to you, "That's it, go, Dave, don't watch it," that'd have broke my heart. But you're going, okay, so what? Move on.
Well, maybe I would have got to that point eventually, but I wouldn't have been in that position. I think I was actually prepared. I'd had a conversation because I came out to my best friend first.
I will always support you, whatever you do.
So what do you think is stopping some parents, in your opinion, accepting their kids?
I think there's several different factors. You've got to look at things like race. You've got to look at culture, religion, things like that. And also you've got to look at things like, why is it my son? Why is it my son or my daughter? Why couldn't it be somebody else's son or somebody's daughter?
It's that kind of thing, obviously, right? If it happens to someone else, but not to me.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And sometimes you think to yourself, what have I done wrong as a parent? And that's a guilt that I felt sometimes, because I feel, what did I push you into being, playing football or not playing football or whatever? What did I not do?
Yeah.
And I understand that it's nothing I did. Your sexuality is your sexuality. But you, as a parent, in my opinion, this is only my opinion because I only talk to myself, you look at it and you think, what did I do that I did wrong that I couldn't, what could I have done to change that from that?
So did you almost see it then as a failing in some part on your abilities as a parent?
Yeah, in some ways, because you just think, again, it goes back to me being, born in the late 50s. It was expected that men go to work, you meet a lady, you marry the lady stayed in the kitchen and you go out doing the work. It's that stereotypical
tradition.
Way of life. Yeah. And that's the way the world was looked at. And then when you become a parent, or in my case, when I became a parent, my life changed, completely and utterly changed. I never thought that having 2 boys of my own would change my life forever and make me such a happy person. But then you have to think, what happened? Why did Dave become gay? Why didn't he like women? What have I done wrong?
But I think that's it. I think you hit on a really interesting word there. Why did Dave become gay? Did I become gay, or have I always been gay?
Well, that's the thing.
A philosophical question, isn't it? I guess
it is. Going back to this whole thing about when you become a parent, you accept your children for what they are.
Yeah.
doesn't matter what they are. You know, when I was growing up, it was if you take a different slant on this, if you like, you couldn't be seen with a person of a different race.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say you touched on cultural and kind of religious aspects, so it'd be good to kind of expand on that. So go on, carry on. Yeah.
It's like if I was to go out with a West Indian lady when I was 18 or 19, I'd have the what's it beaten out of me.
Yeah.
Because it just wasn't done.
Yeah.
And you know, there were obviously gay men and women then, and they were shunned. You know, I remember when I was a kid, about 16, where I lived at the time in Essex, a young lad was beaten up very badly because somebody thought he was gay.
I mean,
and that's just a thought. So what, you know, what when you look at it and you think, what are we doing?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's great that we've really come on in regards of like race and ethnicity, that there's so much more diversity and so much more acceptance now in the world. Like you say, like people can be in mixed race relationships, and you know, there's no, people don't bat an eyelid. It's kind of accepted. We're kind of there when it comes to LGBT representation, but I do think there is something to be said around, you know, we're two cisgender white men talking about it, so we're obviously from a very privileged, from that perspective, background, that we're from a, you know, from a Western background, but we know that in society there are big questions and conversations to be had between religion and being LGBT and coming out.
Exactly. If you look at, we go back to the football example, look at the football last year, World Cup held in Qatar, where being gay is illegal. Yet they held one of the biggest football tournaments in the world. And then we're here sitting saying, we should have premierships come out. Well, if they would have come out, they wouldn't be allowed to go to the World Cup.
No, and definitely, like there's so much to be said around sport and being LGBT that I think will definitely pick up again.
Back to race and religion. If you're from Africa and you're gay, again, that's shunned on.
Well, let's just be, Africa's a huge continent. There's more than, you know, it's a very diverse place. Like, depends where you're looking at, South Africa, Ghana, wherever.
If you look at some of the,
well, interestingly, look at, it's mostly, when I've done a bit of research into this, it's the ex-colonial places that you really need to look at, that have got some of the laws aren't the greatest, but then you think, well, they had our laws, so.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If you look at, as you say, if you look at, we'll move away from Africa if you like, but if you look at India and Pakistan, which you say are ex-colonials, their laws are English laws, basically, because we ruled them and we said, you will do this, you will be, and if you look at, especially India, that was Victorian. You know,
yeah, there was someone that said, I think it was a documentary I was watching, and someone was on it. It was looking, I think, at kind of Asia and being LGBT, and one of the quotes, and I can't for life of me remember who it was, said one of the biggest British exports is homophobia. Because it is, because when you look at around the world, you move away from Britain, there are wide diverse sexualities around the world, but we just made it that had to be man and woman married and tradition.
The problem for me is modern society as it stands, there's too much negativity about being lesbian, gay, whatever you want to call it, LGBT, asexual, whatever it is. And there's too much of this, you know, I'm going to be asexual because it means I can have a bigger following on Twitter or something. What the
really? Do you think that people do that?
Well, I think there's a couple of people that, you know, in my opinion, have done that.
Because I just think, you know, I feel like I'm at a point in my life now, hitting 40, that I'm actually okay with being gay. But, you know, I just think, I don't know why anybody would choose, if that's the right word, to put themselves in a position where they exploit being LGBT just for a bigger following.
Do you then say, if you're a heterosexual male that's got children, do you then think, I don't want to go and see, and please forgive me, steps of saying, but if you then say, well, I'm not going to take my children to see steps because they've got a lot of gay people or lesbians or heterosexual or whatever it is in there, and we shouldn't be in that. We should be going to say, I don't care who follows whatever, I'm going to see Elton John because he's Elton John.
So do you think parents would do that if they thought that there's a group or, you know, a TV show or something that was,
I don't know,
predominantly aimed at the LGBT community?
Because today it's like, when you look at some of these singers, Sam Smith, for example, you know, he's come out and he's whatever he is, asexual. Does that
non-binary? They are non-binary.
You know, does that then affect young children to say, well, actually, I want to be non-binary as well because Sam Smith is? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
But then I could argue that I grew up in the 80s and 90s and there was no one that was a positive role model or any role model, but I didn't end up being straight, did I?
No, no. But
So
it's that, as you said earlier, now you got your phones, you got your tablets, you got laptops, you got all this being thrown at you in the news that, you know, XYZ is doing this or ABC is doing that. You have all these things that happen, you know, and it's great now that we've had things like on Strictly Come Dancing, yeah, Strictly Come Dancing. We had same-sex people dancing. You know, 20 years ago that wouldn't have been heard of, but now it's there. So there is, and hopefully that will translate into, you know, more people coming out. And there's lots of things like that happening, and that's fantastic.
is there anything, I'm just thinking, like, there's so much more on TV, and it's great that media now, like TV channels and everything, has so much more exposure to the LGBT community in a positive way. Is there anything you think that you would say to a child or a young person that's like grappling with their identity and is considering telling their parents that they might be gay or trans or what have you, as a bit of advice to them from the other side?
From the other side, for me, if we go back to when you were coming out, be understanding. Don't judge. It could be, and it could be that they're thinking, I'm not sure of my sexuality. Now, if that's the case, and they come out, and you'd come out to yourself and think, I'm gay, Dad. Okay, fine. Okay, that's fine. But then in 2 years' time, you come back to, well, actually, I'm not sure I am gay anymore. I've tried it and I don't like it. I don't want to be extra. Okay. But if you've cut that person off, you can't go back.
Yeah.
If you said, you know, if one of my children or my grandchildren come to me and said, do you know what, Granddad? I think I want to be a girl or I want to be a boy, whatever it is. Okay, let's explore that. Let's look at what you want. Why do you want to do that? And talk to them about it. Be open with it. You know, not.
It's lovely hearing what you're saying, but I'm just gonna flip it the other way around and say, right, you're talking about all those things. So if I came out to you now and said, I think I might be gay and, you know, fancy boys, for example, why would you want to question that and go through that exploration with me? Whereas for my brother, he's never had to come out. He's just lived his life and has got a girlfriend. You've never had those conversations with him.
No.
So I'm just interested to think why you would then think they'd be appropriate to have with me.
Because I have no experience of your life. I've experienced being a heterosexual male. I have no experience of being gay, LGBT, or any other things. So for me, I want to understand how I can help. And the way I can help is by understanding what you're going through.
So is there anything you've done in the past that has helped you? Because obviously we've had conversations as I, you know, in my adult years and things. Is there anything you would say to any parent or carer that's listening now that thinks, right, this sounds like it could be my situation in my family? Where could they go, or what would you kind of signpost them to that has helped you, or you think would be a good place?
I think nowadays you need to have safeguarding, so you need to go to your teachers first, or somebody that you can trust.
But do you think it's appropriate for a parent to go to a teacher and say, I think little Johnny might be gay?
Where else are you going to go? If little Johnny won't talk to you, maybe little Johnny spoke to his teacher. Now, I'm not sure his teacher could tell you anything anyway.
No, I mean, from a teacher's perspective, if a child disclosed to me they were LGBT,
but at least if I've gone to the teacher and said, you're little Johnny's teacher, and I come to you and say, look, Dave, I think little Johnny's gay. What can I do? At least then you might be able to point me in a direction. Because if you think about this.
But is that the teacher's job? Should a teacher?
No, but
I say this as an educator. Should it be my job to give you signposting information?
But where do I go? If little Johnny, my little Johnny, comes to me and says whatever, or I think that little Johnny's transgender or gay or little, you know, Jane's lesbian, where do I go to seek this out? Do I go on the internet and get a load of rubbish? Because if you look at the internet, there's so much, excuse my language, crap and misinformation.
Yeah.
Where can I go to get some trustworthy information?
Yeah. No, you raise a really interesting point. And I think, you know, when I've done some looking around this kind of thing, and when you go to, there are some websites out there that have got horrific, like forum websites, have got some horrific stories on there about parents saying that my child might be gay or that kind of thing. So I think that is scary.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But from a positive side, I mean, I don't know if you've looked at any of these things, but like the NSPCC have got some great stuff on there. And there's also a couple of charities that are really good, worth mentioning. Stonewall do have some bits, who are like the big kind of LGBT.
But again, if you're looking at it from my perspective, so I'm a normal guy, and I don't know anything about these NSPCC and all the other stuff. And all little Johnny comes and says, "I want to be gay." Where do I go? And that's one of the other big things, because for me personally, I don't want to alienate little Johnny, but I also want to understand how I can help little Johnny.
Yeah.
By understanding his journey, because obviously it's a journey I've never been on.
Yeah.
But I don't want to push him to do anything he doesn't want to do.
Mm.
And I will help him as much as I can. But where do I go to seek advice? Like if I want to find advice on STDs, I go to the doctors.
Yeah.
Where do I go if little Johnny comes to me and says, "Granddad, I want to be a woman"? Where do I go?
Mm. It's interesting. We'll definitely put some links in the chat description from the podcast. But you raise an interesting point that actually, as a parent, where do you go? Where do you get the information from?
You've got to think about today. There's single mums out there, as well as single dads, that come across this. So their little Johnny might come to them saying, "Mummy, I want to be a boy," or "Mummy, I want to be a girl."
Yeah.
And you've got enough on your plate trying to get them to school and have dinner money for them. So then, where do you go? As I say, to me, I'd go to school and say, "What do I do?" Because that's where I guess most children feel safest to say, in a safe environment, or I hopefully think that's where they would go. And please God, let it be so, that if a child is in school and he says to his teacher, "I think I'm gay, I think I'm lesbian, I think I'm transgender," or whatever it is, that teacher holds that person's hand, so to speak, and lets them do it. That must feel a tremendous weight on your shoulders, because society in general is based on two roles. You're either a man or you're a woman. I don't want to be a boy anymore. I want to be a girl. I want whatever.
Well, you're right. There's loads of research that shows about mental health and well-being impact of being LGBT, and whether children and young people are in a supportive environment, whether that's home or in school or not. So you're right in saying that you would hope that LGBT young people would want to come out to their teachers and feel safe that they could do. Also, just to reiterate that point, that a teacher does not have to disclose that information to anybody. It's not information that needs to go home to parents unless that child wants that to, as the current legislation stands. Yeah, I think we'd want kids to be able to do it in school, but I'm not sure, Dad, if actually going to a teacher is the right thing to do as a parent.
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? Where do we go? I said, if my little grandson or my granddaughter come to me tomorrow and said, I want to change sex, Granddad, where do I go? If I go on the net, there's so much stuff on there. I want to find out, how can I support that little Johnny, little Jane into that situation? It could be that it's a fad. I'm not saying it is, I'm not saying it isn't. But there's
like you said about, people do explore their sexuality. Yeah. Lots of people do. And then, you end up working out who you are and what you are comfortable with and what you feel.
You do. And that's where I think, as a parent or a grandparent, you need to be able to understand and help, guide, and give some understanding to them, and be supportive and a safe person to talk to.
Yeah.
If little Johnny came to me and said, I want to be a girl, Granddad, okay, I'm not going to tell your parents. Totally understand.
That's their information to share, isn't it? It's their story.
It's theirs. Yeah. But if they want to tell me in confidence, I will respect that confidence with my utmost diligence. I will never disclose that unless Johnny says to me, "Can you tell my dad or my mum or whatever, or my auntie Jean or whatever?" That's for them, and I would support. If they said to me, "Can you come with me?" Yeah, I'd come with you. I'll come with you. I'll stand and support you. But you've also got to be aware that I will never desert you.
Keeping it thinking about coming out, it's that kind of sense for me, and I think we've talked about this before, is that coming out isn't something that happens once. I didn't come out age 19 and then that was it. The whole world knew. It's something you are forever doing, and it's a process and it's a journey, and it's like every new social situation, I'm constantly scanning a room and thinking, how much of my authentic self can I be in this environment?
I can walk down the street with my wife, hold hands on, give her a cuddle.
Yeah.
For you to do that in the town we live in at the moment, I'm not sure it'd be very happy. Even if we go to some of the bigger towns.
And I think that goes back to kind of culture and traditions and religions, and it's that kind of thing of challenging the status quo. And I'm not saying that any individual that's maybe LGBT is challenging it directly, but cumulatively, when you add it all together, it's moving society in a way that some people aren't comfortable with. So
until we get that balance across society where everybody's comfortable with their own feelings,
actually coming out shouldn't necessarily need to be something that happens. We should get really, aim to get to a point in the world where no child has to come out to their parent, because it's just, there's no assumption that you're going to be straight.
Well, the thing is, I didn't come out being heterosexual, so what's the difference?
Yeah. Because we live in a straight, but then we live in a straight world, don't we? I've been through, as a community of LGBT plus people, through the years, there's been systems and systems of oppression that have gone on. And to break through that, sometimes you have to highlight the very thing that makes you stand out from everyone else.
You need to bring whatever it is out in the open. You cannot hide it under a bushel. You need to say, this is me, I'm X. And if you don't do that, and we don't bring it to the forefront, no matter, oppression is horrible, but we need to stamp it out and say, look, we're all one. Forget all this other stuff that happened in the past. It's in the past. But let's move on. Draw a line under it, move on.
Yeah.
So we've got gay footballers, and who cares? Let me just check. No, nobody cares.
You say that though, I care.
There will be, yeah. But there will be people as well, because you mentioned I was a West Ham fan. I've been a West Ham fan for 50 odd years.
I'll try not to roll my eyes, but okay.
But the thing is, if we take football as an example, if a professional footballer came out as gay, the abuse that he would have from the fans, because they're all,
it goes back to that masculine men's, yeah.
It's like, what does that even mean? It's tribal. If you look at the England women's football team, men go and support it and go on, girl. Yeah. Doesn't matter that the girl they're cheering is in a relationship with another girl. Doesn't matter. But if that was in a Premiership team, would they do the same? I don't think they would.
I've got some really interesting. Sorry, Dad, I'm going to cut you off there. I've got some really interesting thoughts on that. I think we're going to have to pick it back up, because otherwise this episode is going to carry on going on and on forever. But I think just to kind of sum up then, when we think about coming out, if there was one nugget of information that you could say to a parent or a child that is about to go through the process of coming out, or accepting themselves for who they are, what would you say? What are your final wise words?
Don't be afraid to accept them for what they are. So if your son or daughter is whatever they want to be, let them be what they want to be. If you don't do that, you will lose the most valuable thing in your life.
Yeah.
The love of your child. And your children are, to me, the future. You didn't choose to come into this world. Me and your mum chose to have you. I feel so strong that if you love your children, as you say you do, love them. Just let them be what they are and support them. Don't be afraid. Just think how much they're afraid. So just nurture them and talk to them. Don't put them down. For me, the golden nugget for me is, you are what you are, accept it.
It's unconditional love, isn't it, what you're talking about, really?
I love my children unconditionally. I wouldn't change a thing about any of you. I feel guilt sometimes because of things you tell me, that you were bullied at school and it took you so long to come out. However, said that, you have given me some of the best moments in my life by being you. And I'm not saying you being gay, but Dave being Dave.
Yeah.
Be true to yourself.
But I think from what you're saying, I think the kind of thing that reminded me of thinking about it from my perspective is that actually, yeah, being gay is a big thing, and admitting it yourself is a big thing, and then telling people you love and hoping they're going to accept you for who you are is a big thing. But it's only part of who I am.
It is.
Yeah, I might be gay, but it's not everything about me. I'm not sat here wearing pride colours and singing Kylie to the hills or what have you. I just or the Spice Girls or whatever else. But
that's what I'm trying to say. You're Dave.
Yeah.
Being gay doesn't define you.
It's a part of who I am.
Defines you. Yeah. Being Dave defines you.
Yeah.
You are Dave.
Yeah.
I don't care about you. You could be transgender. You'd still be Dave. Even if you call yourself Diane, all right, you'd be Diane. But you would still be my little boy or my little girl, whatever it is. As you said, unconditional love. And to me, it's about support and encouragement and letting you be what you want to be.
And yeah, I think you're right. And I think the only other thing I'd kind of add to that is that, going back to when I did come out for initially, it was that fear I had was just irrational. When you think back now, I'm going to lose my parents, we'll lose my family. It's about realizing nothing's ever really as bad as you think it's going to be. And things do get better, when you start
They do.
communicating and talking through things.
They do. And that's why I say if my advice would be to any person that is thinking about talking to their parents is think it through. Don't be afraid. Make sure that you have a backup plan. So just be aware that, the people you trust are the people you trust.
So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Educating Barry. We hope our conversation today has given you some food for thought.
Remember, growth isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share with someone who might need to hear this. We'd love to hear from you too.
So please do share your thoughts or suggest new content by emailing us at educatingbarry@queered.co.uk or using the hashtag educatingbarry on social media. Until next time, keep talking, keep listening and keep loving. This is David and Barry signing off.